Bismillah, the next chapter, Imam al-Ba'ali rahimahullah ta'ala discusses obligations, discusses breaking the fast, as well as, most importantly perhaps, the intention to fast. Begins this chapter, he says, it is obligatory upon every capable Muslim of legal capacity. So here's a couple of basic prerequisites for fasting. Number one is you have to be physically able to do so. A person that is not physically capable is not obliged to fast. The details of that we'll get into shortly. The next is you have to be Muslim. A Muslim person, of course, is obliged because Ramadan is an obligation. Fasting this month is a pillar of Islam. And we can find this in both the Quran and the Sunnah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. And whoever witnesses the month, meaning they witness the crescent, the new moon, is obliged to fast. And of course, anyone who is told of the new moon's birth, and that was covered in the previous chapter. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Buni al-Islamu ala khams, that Islam has been built, or is built around 5 basic pillars, and from those pillars is Sawm Ramadan, fasting this month. And after that, they have to be of legal capacity, as discussed so many times in this class. Legal capacity means that they are baligh aqil, or aqil baligh, of sound mind and pubescent, reach the age of puberty. He says, it is, however, required of every guardian to order the capable minor to fast and smack them for it in order that they become accustomed to it. So basically talking about capable minors. What does that mean? Capable minor means someone that is not, has reached the age of puberty. However, they're physically able to fast. Much like the prayer, we were ordered by the Prophet ﷺ to encourage young people to pray at the age of 7 and then to reprimand them at the age of 10 in the instance that they do not pray. So reprimanding here means spanking or light smacking, nothing that would leave a mark or that would be permanent damage. You don't abuse children in Islam. We love little kids and we should be merciful to them as our Prophet commanded us to do. However, it may be necessary, as being a parent is, sometimes you have to do things that you don't really want to do. However, the children should be taught and they should be driven to develop good habits at an early age. That's the job of a parent. The job of a parent is not to always shower them with presents and gifts and shower them with excuses and let them go all the time. But a parent's job is to raise a child. And in Islam, part of raising a child, your responsibility as a parent means to help them develop good habits when it comes to worshiping Allah. And so when it comes to fasting, you have to look into the child's particular case. However, if they are capable of fasting and you do order them to fast, they should not be spanked for it or reprimanded for it if they're younger than 10. And we take that rule from the prayer that I just mentioned. And of course we want them to develop these good habits, so you don't want to abuse the situation to where they grow up despising worship because all they ever know of it is being abused, is being spanked or being talked down to. You should encourage them by setting goals for them and rewarding their good practices of worship. That's probably a good rule of thumb. Whoever is incapable due to old age or terminal illness is to break the fast and is obliged, unless coupled with a common excuse such as travel, to feed one poor person the amount which suffices an expiation for every day. So first the Imam begins talking about who's obliged to fast, and now he's discussing who is not obliged to fast. And those that are not obliged to fast are those that are of old age. They're just elderly. Their level of strength and capacity is waned over the years, diminished. Or someone that's been diagnosed with a terminal illness or a chronic disease that would prevent them from fasting. Meaning that if they did fast, it would worsen their condition, it would cause a great deal of suffering, and so they're not obliged to fast. But in place of that, they are to feed one poor person the amount which suffices an expiation for every day, and that amount is 1 mud of bur, which is wheat. 1 mud is equivalent to a double hand scoop. And there's actually a very precise measurement for this. This is an equivalent. There is a precise amount. Or nisfu sa'in min ghayrihi, or 2 of these, which would be half of a sa'a of other staple foods like rice and flour and dates and cereals maybe. So that those food types and measurements would be given to a poor person, a needy person, in place of you actually fasting, unless you have a common excuse to break your fast, like traveling. So if you are elderly or you are diagnosed with a chronic or terminal disease and you happen to be traveling, well, you would probably break your fast that day, or you're permitted to break your fast that day, and so you do not have to feed a poor person during that time. How does this happen? How do you feed the poor people, etc.? Well, you can, for example, if you're going to break your fast for 29 or 30 days, you can call 29 or 30 people all together, and you can feed them. You can feed them with food of the staple foods. You can give them meat and rice and things of that nature, or you can give it to them, in a different manner. As he says, it is recommended to break the fast and disliked to keep it during a journey in which shortening is permitted, even if there is no difficulty. So now we're moving from those that are allowed to break their fast to those that are recommended to break their fast. And so this is, of course, a rukhsa, or an allowance that's been given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is, when you're traveling, you don't have to break your fast. In fact, it's encouraged that you break your fast. When you're traveling, you don't have to break your fast, but it is encouraged to break your fast because of the nature of this allowance. And Allah loves when you take those allowances. There is a condition for this. He says, during the journey in which shortening is permitted, even if there is no difficulty. So you have to be going on a journey which is permissible in nature. When this has been discussed in the chapter of prayer, meaning the journey's intention is not to seek haram, like you're not going to go gamble, that's why you're traveling, or you're not going to go and commit a crime, that's why you're traveling. If that's the case, then of course you're not going to be permitted to shorten your prayer, break your fast. Or you're not traveling simply to break your fast, trying to play with the law of Allah. That would be considered impermissible haram. And you would not be allowed to shorten nor to break your fast. So the distance also has to be considered. It has to be the same distance permitted for you to shorten your prayer. And as pointed out earlier, that's about 85 U.S. miles, give or take. It's taqriban la tahdidan. It's a roundabout number, not precise. And you may be familiar with the other distances that have been mentioned throughout the ages, some more, some less. But for our intents and purposes here with the school, this is what I've come to understand based on scholarly endeavor. Not mine, but others of the madhab. He says here, it's also noted that it's makruh to keep it, right? To travel and to fast while traveling. He says it's disliked to keep it, disliked to keep the fast. And this does not matter, even if there's difficulty or not, whether it's hard to keep the fast or easy to keep the fast. I mean, most of us are traveling in relative comfort these days. We're driving in cars with air conditioners. We're flying in planes, flying in business class and first class. And even if we're traveling on ships, we're traveling in cabins with beds, and the comfort is great, alhamdulillah. But this is not something to consider when determining whether or not to break the fast. It says it's disliked for the pregnant and nursing woman to fast while they fear for themselves or their child. So here again, makruh. If you're pregnant or you're nursing, that you continue to fast if you fear for your own health or the health of your child. It says they are to make up what they broke, meaning the ones that have broken their fast for whatever reason. They're to make up what they broke, and it is further required of someone feeding a child while fearing for the child only to feed a poor person for every day. So here is particular. The person that breaks for travel, or the pregnant woman or breastfeeding woman that breaks out of fear for herself and her child, or fear for herself alone, is only required to make up the fast. If you are a pregnant woman or breastfeeding woman who fears simply for the child's health, but not your own, you're physically capable, it's not going to cause you any harm, but you're worried that perhaps the child in your womb would suffer from not receiving nutrients or nourishment throughout the day, or that maybe even your milk supply would diminish because of fasting, and then your child wouldn't receive the proper nutrients that they needed, and you're permitted to fast. If you do so simply because of the child, then you're also obliged to feed a poor person for every day that you do that, much like the elderly, or the person that has a chronic or terminal illness. And this is some of the evidence for this is found in Sunan Abi Dawud. It's reported by Ibn Abbas. And he said that the allowance here of the rukhsa was for the elderly, both male and female, that were physically capable of fasting, but they decided to break their fast, and in place of that, they fed a poor person for every day. Also for the pregnant or the nursing women, if they were afraid for their children, they would break their fast and they would feed person. So there is some textual evidence for this, both cases in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It says breaking the fast is obligatory if required to save a sacred life. Here, we're just moving along in a sequential order. Now we're talking about those that are obliged to break their fast. So as you note, we began those that are obliged to fast, those that are allowed to break their fast, those that are recommended to break their fast, and now those that are obliged to break their fast. He says, if required to save a sacred life from demise. So if, you have to break your fast to save someone that may be drowning or caught in a fire or an extreme situation where you may need to break your fast in order to help them, you may need the energy or you may need something of that nature, then you're obliged to break your fast. He says for every obligatory fast, there must be a specific intention made at night. Before I get onto that point, I need to mention also, this is what Imam al-Ba'li mentions in his explanation, that it may also be you may also be obliged to break your fast if what you're doing, if your your occupation is and this, you got to be very careful with this, don't abuse this, but what you're doing is extremely difficult, and by fasting through that work, it could cause you some harm, and you fear that you may lose your life, you may in the process meet your demise. Then you have to break your fast and you have to make it up later. So here we're not talking about it's hard or I'm tired or I can't concentrate or I have exams or something of that nature. No, proper planning, proper meal planning, proper sleep planning can all mitigate any type of difficulty that you may be facing. But we're talking about extreme circumstances where what you're required to do, your job or something of that nature, like you're a firefighter or something where if you don't stay hydrated, you could die in the middle of in the middle of your work. Then you would be required to fast and make it up. So where we were before was talking about the intention, and this is important as well. It says for every obligatory fast, there must be a specific intention made at night, even if what contradicts it is done, but not the intention of mere obligation. So here he's talking about the intention of fasting. So for Ramadan, there has to be an intention for every day of Ramadan, and that intention is made at night before the fast begins. And this type of intention also has to be made if you're making up days of Ramadan, if you're fulfilling a fast which was obligated by way of oath, or if you're completing a fast which was a kafara, an expiation. And the reason that it has to be done every night as opposed to at the beginning of the month, And this is a statement of some of the scholars that you can make a general intention that encompasses the entire month of Ramadan. But for our school, for the Hanbali disciple, and those that are followers of the madhab, the intention has to be made every night because each day is an individual act of worship in and of itself. And we can understand that because if you break the fast of one day, it doesn't spoil all of the other days. So each day, as an independent act of worship, must have a coupled intention with that particular day. The intention, of course, must be made at night, even if what contradicts it is done. Meaning, if you make your intention to fast the next day after, for example, Maghrib or after Isha, and then you end up eating, or you end up with your spouse and you enjoy one another's company, and then, it's time to fast, your intention was there from the beginning, and so that intention will suffice. And the intention has to be specific enough, not just I'm fasting an obligatory fast, but I'm fasting an obligatory fast for the month of Ramadan. He jumps to the next kind of another topic. He says voluntary fasting intended during the day, even after the zawal, is valid. So the zawal is when the sun has just fallen from its zenith, basically the time for dhuhr, so long as nothing which spoils the fast has been previously committed. It is deemed as a legislated fast and will be rewarded from its time of commencement. So here you're talking about voluntary fasting, not obligatory fasting. Voluntary fasting can be, the intention for it can be made in the middle of the day or any type or any time of the day, so long as you haven't done anything that would break your fast. You didn't have breakfast, you didn't have tea, you weren't intimate with your spouse. So for example, you come, it's lunchtime, or whatever time that may be for you, it's lunchtime and you're looking around, there's nothing to eat, nothing available, no food in the home, and so you decide, well, I haven't eaten all this time, I'm just going to continue the day as a person fasting. And that is sufficient. And this was something that the Prophet ﷺ did. And you will be rewarded for the same action for the duration of your fast. The specifics of the intention, how it works or how it's made, he mentions, alhamdulillah, he says, if someone conceives that they will fast tomorrow, they have made an intention. So here you're not obliged, not required, not even encouraged to verbalize that intention, to say, tomorrow I'm fasting because it's Ramadan, the first, the second, the third, an obligatory fast, or kafara, or whatever it may be. But when you conceive of it, you in your mind, you're set on fasting. You may set your alarm to wake up for suhoor, or you may eat suhoor, much like making wudu. This is an indication that you've conceived to fast. Like when you make wudu, you conceive that you're going to go pray, and so therefore you're preparing for it. It says just like eating and drinking with the intention to fast, meaning here suhoor, or eating in the nighttime in order to prepare your body or to nourish the body to be able to handle the fast the following day. And that concludes the chapter.